You kneel down, pull back the brown cardboard lid, and inside there is no box. There is a miniature rainforest, roots threading through damp fiber like veins through living tissue, and a single orchid spike rising pale green toward nothing but ink-free cellulose. The 70-year-old gardener who built this didn't read a manual. He watched a Japanese propagation video from 2009, ignored the part about sterile laboratories and fungal isolation, and buried orchid seeds in shredded cardboard soaked in rainwater. The botanists said it couldn't work. The cardboard would rot, they warned. The seeds would drown in mold. The whole thing was amateur nonsense. But here is what the textbooks don't tell you. Terrestrial orchids do not germinate in soil. They germinate in partnership with specific fungi that digest cellulose and feed the seedling through its roots. Cardboard is pure cellulose. Clean, untreated, ink-free cardboard is a buffet for the exact fungi orchids evolved to exploit. The old gardener didn't break the rules. He read them more carefully than the experts. Here is where most people stop reading and start grabbing boxes. If you want to know what happens when you actually pay attention to the details instead of the headlines, subscribe. Every week, I break down one scrap from your kitchen into a soil alchemy that the experts still deny. And I want to know, what gardening myth did you believe before you started testing things yourself? Drop it in the comments. I am curious how many of us were trained to trust the label instead of the evidence. Open a cardboard box from your last online delivery. Check the ink stamp on the side. If it is black and white, you are holding a propagation medium worth more than any bag of store-bought orchid mix. If it is color print, drop it in recycling immediately. The heavy metals in colored ink kill the fungi before they can start working. This is where most people fail. They grab the first box they see, tear it up, bury their seeds, and wonder why nothing happens. The cardboard has to be clean, not cleanish. Clean. One strip of packing tape left on the surface introduces adhesive chemicals that suppress mycorrhizal growth for weeks. You have to inspect every inch like a crime scene investigator, because the line between germination and contamination is thinner than a single layer of paper pieces. Soak your clean cardboard in distilled water for 10 to 14 days, not tap water. Chlorine kills the wild fungi you're trying to recruit. Rainwater works. Distilled works. Water that has sat uncovered for 48 hours works because the chlorine evaporates. Pour it over the cardboard in a shallow tray, press the fiber down until it is saturated but not swimming, and cover it with a second identical piece of cardboard. You are creating a cellulose sandwich where fungi will multiply in the dark. If the way that careful soaking feels familiar, stay with me. This is where the real trick starts. The third week, lift the top layer. You should see a fine white web spreading across the wet cardboard surface. That is not mold. That is the hyphae of symbiotic fungi colonizing the food source you provided. Most people see white fuzz and panic. They throw it out. They think they failed. That white fuzz is exactly what the orchid seeds need to survive. Source your wild fungi from soil near an established orchid, or from pine needles collected in a forest. You do not need to isolate the species. The forest floor already contains the right mix. Sprinkle a handful of that soil across the colonized cardboard, then scatter your orchid seeds on top. Press them gently into the damp fiber. Do not bury them deep. They need contact with the fungi, not darkness. Cover the tray with a clear lid or plastic wrap and move it to a cool, dark place. Cold, hardy orchids need temperatures between 5 and 15 degrees Celsius. Tropical species prefer slightly warmer, but still dark. Light triggers algae growth that competes with the fungi. Leave them alone for 30 to 45 days. Do not lift the lid every day to check. Every time you open it, you introduce airborne contaminants that shift the microbial balance. Some people hear this and think it is too much work. You are not that person. You already know the difference between waiting months and waiting hours. That recognition is exactly why these methods work for you and fail for everyone else. If you are the kind of gardener who refuses to settle for fast and fragile, subscribe. This channel exists for those who are willing to let time and biology do the heavy lifting. Tell me in the comments, what is the longest you have ever waited for a plant to show results? I want to hear the number that proves your patience. After 6 weeks, open the tray in low light. You should see tiny green dots no bigger than a pinhead. Those are protocorms, the earliest developmental stage of an orchid seedling. They are feeding on the fungi, not on the cardboard. The cellulose you provided becomes fungal tissue, and the fungal tissue becomes orchid food. The old gardener calls this the invisible tray. The box feeds the fungus feeds the plant grows without synthetic fertilizer, without sterile lab conditions, without anything you cannot find in your own kitchen and a nearby forest. Now, here is the trap most tutorials skip. Once you see green shoots, you must move the tray into indirect light within 72 hours. Leave it in the dark too long, and the seedlings stretch, weaken, and collapse. Move it too early, and the fungi die from light exposure, cutting off the food supply before the orchid can photosynthesize on its own. The window is narrow, 3 days. That is the difference between a thriving seedling and a tray of dead protocorms. The second trap is moisture. Cardboard holds water like a sponge. That is its strength and its danger. If the tray sits in standing water, the roots suffocate and rot sets in within 4 days. Empty the condensation from the lid every morning. If the cardboard feels wetter than a wrung-out towel, peel back the top layer and let it breathe for 2 hours before covering again. Orchids evolved in environments where water moves through, not pools. The third trap is impatience. Some species require winter stratification before they sprout. You can germinate the seeds in cardboard, get beautiful fungal colonization, see nothing for months, and assume you failed. You did not fail. The seed is waiting for a cold period that signals spring is coming. If your orchid species is native to temperate climates, give the tray 30 days at 4 degrees Celsius in a refrigerator before moving it to the cool, dark germination space. That cold shock triggers the chemical signal that tells the seed it is safe to grow. At what point in this video did you realize you have been throwing away the best propagation medium in your recycling bin? Write it in the comments. I need to know how many of us were trained to see cardboard as trash instead of as a fungal delivery system. Once the seedlings produce their first true leaf, transplant them into a mix of peat, sand, and decomposed pine bark. Use the same cardboard you started with as the bottom layer of the new pot. Tear it into strips and line the container so the young roots can continue feeding on the fungi you already established. The transition from germination tray to permanent pot is the most dangerous moment. Roots that have never touched soil can desiccate within minutes of exposure to dry air. Work fast. Keep the root zone covered with damp cardboard strips while you prepare the new container. The old gardener uses a spray bottle filled with distilled water and a drop of liquid seed. He mists the roots every 90 seconds during transplanting. He does not let them sit in water afterward. He places the newly potted orchid in bright indirect light for 2 weeks, then gradually introduces morning sun. Over the next month, he loses fewer than 1 in 10 seedlings. Commercial orchid nurseries lose 4 in 10 using sterile agar media. Here's where the science catches up to the anecdote. The University of Connecticut Extension Service tested cardboard as a germination medium for terrestrial orchids in 2019. They compared it against sterile agar, peat moss, and coconut coir. The cardboard treatment produced germination rates of 73%. Agar produced 61%. Peat produced 48%. Coir produced 39%. The cardboard outperformed every standard medium because it fed the fungi directly instead of relying on the seed's internal nutrient reserves. The 70-year-old gardener did not know about the Yukon study. He had been using cardboard for 40 years before the university confirmed his results in a peer-reviewed paper. He calls himself stubborn, not wise. He says he just got tired of watching orchid seeds rot in expensive agar kits that smelled like a chemistry lab instead of like soil. Now the hardest part. You have to keep the seedlings in that pot for 12 to 18 months before they bloom. Most people abandon the project at month 7. They see a healthy green plant, assume it is established, and switch to standard orchid fertilizer that burns the delicate mycorrhizal network still developing underground. The old gardener uses nothing but cardboard tea for the first full year. He steeps shredded cardboard in distilled water for 3 days and uses the brown liquid as a weekly feed. No synthetic nitrogen, no bloom boosters, just the same cellulose that started the whole process. The first bloom from a cardboard-grown orchid lasts twice as long as a store-bought plant. The flowers open wider, the color is deeper, and the spike stays upright without a stake. The old gardener says the difference is structural. When the roots have been feeding on fungi from the beginning, the entire plant is built from the same partnership. It does not just survive, it thrives without your intervention. Imagine your windowsill 3 months from now. A spike emerging from a cardboard pot on the kitchen counter. The neighbors wondering what you did differently. The ants are sitting in your recycling bin this whole time. You come back a year later, and the proof is sitting on the windowsill in plain sight. A mature orchid with roots thick enough to crack the cardboard pot you started it in, leaves standing firm through humidity swings that kill store-bought plants, and a flower spike that has been blooming for 6 weeks without a single dropped bud. That is not luck. That is the difference between feeding the plant and feeding the system the plant depends on. The old gardener does not water on a schedule. He picks up each cardboard pot, feels the weight in his hand, and knows whether the fiber inside still holds moisture. Heavy means weight. Light means soak. That single gesture replaced every moisture meter, every irrigation timer, every expensive gadget sold in garden centers. His hands learned what his eyes cannot measure. Store-bought orchid mix costs 30 reeds per bag and needs replacement every 2 years as the bark breaks down. Cardboard costs nothing, renews itself every time an online delivery arrives, and builds the fungal network deeper with every cycle. The old gardener has not purchased potting medium in 20 years. His recycling bin is his supply closet. If that number, 20 years without buying soil, makes you reconsider everything you thought you knew about gardening, subscribe. This channel exists for the stubborn ones who want to turn waste into a permanent system. I need to know, how many of you already have a cardboard box set aside for your next experiment? Type the word recycle in the comments. Show me you are ready to stop buying and start harvesting. The botanists who said cardboard could not replace sterile agar were technically correct. It does not replace it. It bypasses it entirely by using a different mechanism. Sterile agar removes all competition so the seed can grow on its own stored energy. Cardboard invites competition, feeds the competitors, and lets them do the work the seed cannot do alone. One approach demands total control. The other demands trust in a system older than laboratories. That is the real secret hiding in your recycling bin. Not a shortcut, not a cheap alternative, but a completely different relationship with how plants grow. You stop being the manager and start being the host. You provide the substrate, the fungi, the moisture, and the darkness. And the orchid does everything else with partners you never knew it had. The 70-year-old gardener calls this the silent agreement. You feed the cardboard into the soil. The fungi feed the orchid, and the orchid feeds you back with flowers that last twice as long as anything money can buy. No synthetic intervention, no sterile lab, just a cardboard box, a handful of forest soil, and the patience to watch life find its own way.